We start in Nicaragua, where the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights has concluded security forces used excessive force against the anti-government protests that started on April 18. The commission, which was invited by the government of Daniel Ortega, arrived in the country on May 21st to investigate alleged human rights violations and share their findings in a report. According to the Commission's report, at least 76 people were killed and 868 wounded at the hands of police and others. As many as 438 people were detained, many without charge. Sandinista supporters have accused protesters of provoking this violence. The Nicaraguan Foreign Minister Denis Moncada said the government will now study and analyze the report. The Commission on Human Rights also recommended the government guarantee the right to protest and stop violent repression.
The objective of this visit is for a preliminary observation of the human rights situation in the country in regards to the violent incidents that have taken place since 18th April this year, and to document these incidents and to put forward the first concrete recommendations to the state.
Meanwhile, the Nicaraguan government restarted talks with students and businesses on Monday. The national dialogue was called by President Daniel Ortega and is aimed at resolving issues that led to recent violence in the country.
There is a heavy security presence outside of Lady of Fatima Seminary, where the national dialogue called by President Daniel Ortega has been taking place. The media is waiting for updates after 8 hours of talks. The creation of a follow-up committee was approved to carry out recommendations of the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights and to schedule new visits to the country. The proposal brought up by the student sector was taken on board by the government.
It seems to me that we are going in a positive direction in this democratic exercise. I can say that we are walking a path that seems right, in search of solutions to the problems in Nicaragua.
The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights presented its preliminary observations on its visit and announced its recommendations. They say they expect to have a final report next month.
We believe there will be a peaceful, democratic, constitutional solution for the serious political crisis in the country, and we take note of the installation of the National Dialogue Roundtable.
The government says the free movement of people must be respected. This refers to roadblocks in the main avenues of the city. The government has also asked for the violence to stop.
Unfortunately, the opposition has declared something different about the roadblocks, and this represents a risk for the people who are suffering from this problem. There are people who need to come to Managua for medical reasons. There are people whose homes and businesses are affected, who are living with this problem firsthand.
The talks will resume on Wednesday and will address once again the proposal from the government, calling for the free movement of families and an end to the violence.
Moving to Ecuador, where the government is going to change the country's communication law written under the former government to enable what it says is more press freedom. The Secretary of Communications revealed the 6 main points of these reforms.
The Secretary of Communication, Andrés Michelena, submitted reforms to the communication law to the President of the Assembly, Elizabeth Cabezas. The Secretary said that the main points of the reform are freedom of thought and expression, enshrined in international tools of human rights that have been ratified by the Ecuadorian state.
The first thing is respect to international rules and constitutional principles. The second one is the elimination of a system of sanction and control, which means that Supercom will disappear. And the third topic is to strengthen citizen participation.
The Secretary announced that the reforms will strengthen the institution and expand functions of the Ombudsman's Office and Council for Regulation and Developing Communication. The announcement had sparked mixed reactions.
The government has shown some positive signs, but an ombudsman's office is still necessary that works objectively, because if not, it is just a government's tool ready to impose the will of the national rulers instead of the citizens' rights.
The analyst and co-author of the communication law, Rommel Jurado, said that the decision taken by Moreno preserved communication rights.
We must acknowledge the big improvement this law had in terms of human rights. It is possible that in some way the protection of those rights was weakened. Let's see how the political forces take these reforms, because I think that the right wing was waiting for the abolition of these rights. Fortunately, it didn't happen.
The president of the assembly said that she will prioritize the reform and also made a call to different sectors who may want to contribute to building a new law that guarantees freedom and the use of media and contents to contribute to the country's development. Denise Herrera, Telesur Quito, Ecuador.
Now to Colombia, where the number of people evacuated because of the Cauca River flooding has risen to over 25,000. Workers are trying to raise the height of the dam to divert the water and avoiding a collapse that would put around 130,000 people at risk. The area in the northeast department of Antioquia is still on high alert due to the risk of a further rise in the water level. The flood happened when one of the tunnels of the Hidroituango electric plant project was unblocked.
We were evacuating the entire population. It is a preventative measure to preserve human life.
The main risk is that of breaking the dam. We need to consider it because it's really important that we are honest about the risks so that we can do what we need to do to save lives.
On May 27th, presidential elections will take place in Colombia. However, reports of electoral fraud are already starting to mount.
Just days before Colombia's presidential elections, Gustavo Petro reported an imminent electoral fraud case, which questions the transparency of the process.
The State's Council task was to check the software during the audits. Today, just a week before the elections, this still hasn't happened. That means that CNE and the registration office didn't follow orders.
These reports were already made by the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation in their latest statement.
We have our doubts with regards to the software. We think there's a risk of fraudulent activity.
President Santos has said that there will be an observation group, but Petro thinks the opposite.
The president lies. We never asked for observation. We asked him to check the software, which presents algorithm modifications that might end in fraud. Our European counterparts can't aid us in this. They don't have the experience to audit the software. Yesterday, the president deceived the public.
Another accusation of potential voter fraud is centered around electoral jury designation, something about which the Peace and Reconciliation Foundation has also made vocal warnings.
We don't like the jury. That random way in which people get those charges is really concerning.
The registrator stated that the accusations from both Peace and Reconciliation and Petro make no sense. The national government then called for an extraordinary meeting of the National Electoral Guarantees Commission.
The national registrator must present a report about the audits made to check the software. The jury designation process must also be explained by him.
What won't be possible is to have an observation board from the EU to check the software, which created instability in these elections. On top of this, 8 years ago, law dictated that the national government establish an electronic vote system, but it still doesn't exist. This year, people will again have to vote manually.
In Venezuela, Foreign Minister Jorge Arreaza has rejected new sanctions imposed by the United States against his country. Arreaza said the sanctions do not comply with international law. During a press conference, the foreign minister said he had discussed the action of U.S. President Donald Trump with the international observers of Sunday's presidential elections. He added that the Venezuelan people will not be intimidated by measures imposed by other countries. And U.S. President Donald Trump signed off this new round of economic sanctions on Monday afternoon. These include an executive order prohibiting U.S. citizens from carrying out certain financial transactions with the government of Venezuela. The executive action also prohibits the purchase of any debt owed to the government of Venezuela and any debt owed to the country that is pledged as collateral. It also prevents the government of Venezuela from liquidating assets it has a majority ownership of. Meanwhile, a number of Chilean assembly members and various organization leaders have expressed their support for President Nicolás Maduro and his re-election as the independent future of the Bolivarian revolution.
I think the Venezuelan people have resisted with a lot of bravery the shameless intervention. It's what they did in Chile, creating an atmosphere of chaos and shortages when they are only seeking to end the Bolivarian revolution.
The people have come out to defend this process. We haven't had this kind of process in Chile. What is happening in Venezuela surprises us because mainstream media says there's chaos. But the truth is that people are out in the streets voting. That means that media is trying to misinform people. Luckily, there are some media like Telesur or RT.
Our solidarity is with the Venezuelan people, with the Venezuelan government, with this democratic demonstration. Our leader, President Rafael Correa, will be in Venezuela as an international observer. It's a democratic process that we ratify in Ecuador.
El pueblo venezolano.
Venezuelan people and the Bolivarian Revolution have prevailed through electoral processes. It's one of the countries in Latin America that have had the most elections.
Foreign ministers held meetings with a delegation from the African Union, which visited Venezuela to observe the elections. In this meeting, the delegation stressed the need to strengthen the links between the African continent and Latin America and the Caribbean.
Before anything, I want to congratulate, in the name of the African Parliament and in the name of the representatives of the African people, to the people of Chavez, this victory in democracy with its transparency. It has been expressed in a very clear manner, the will of the Venezuelan people, and we also congratulate the people and their president Nicolás Maduro for the success and victory.
I speak in the name of the Lumumba Foundation and on behalf of the Congolese people. As President Chavez would say, we must use the opportunity to strengthen South-South cooperation. We must go beyond speeches and move to concrete and real facts. During all difficult times, the various peoples of Africa have always been at the side of the Venezuelan, always looking to support.
We're taking a short break now, but join us after this video from our multimedia team. Welcome back. Cuba is holding the first funerals of the victims of last Friday's plane crash. In the eastern city of Holguín, families have received the first coffins, and more bodies will arrive as they are identified in the Institute of Forensic Medicine in the capital city of Havana. The number of victims in the plane crash raised to 111 after one of the 3 survivors died on Monday. An ongoing investigation will determine the cause of this accident. Barbados is getting ready for the general elections in 2 days. Prime Minister Frendel Stuart of the DLP made a last-ditch promise that he will pull out of the Caribbean Court of Justice if he wins the re-election. Stewart recently lost a case at the CCJ where a CARICOM national who was a legal resident of Barbados was given permission to vote. Stewart called the court politicians in robes. Opposition candidate Mia Motley said Stewart had sour grapes because of his loss. The CCJ is the highest appellate court for some Caribbean countries. Pope Francis has told one of the victims of sexual abuse that God is accepting of homosexuality. Speaking in an interview on Sunday, Juan Carlos Cruz, one of Chilean priest Fernando Caradima's victims, said that the pontiff told him, "Juan Carlos, that you are gay does not matter. God made you like this and loves you like this. And I don't care. The Pope loves you like this. You have to be happy with who you are." This is not the first time Pope Francis takes a stand on the importance of accepting homosexuality. During his first overseas trip in 2013, Pope Francis said, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" Meanwhile, the 34 Chilean bishops who resigned en masse after a meeting with the Pope have returned home. It is still unknown whether Pope Francis accepted their resignations or not. The president of the Chilean Episcopal Conference, Santiago Silva, said in a letter that the country's church needs an urgent, intense, and extended renewal that should begin with an open dialogue. And the Pope has announced the election of 14 new cardinals. They will come from 5 continents and 11 different countries, including Iraq, Pakistan, Japan, Peru, Mexico, and Bolivia. Since his election as pontiff, only a third of the cardinals chosen by the Pope have a European origin, which reflects his strategy to also give importance to the global south. And one of the new cardinals amongst the 14 chosen by the Pope is an Aymaran bishop from Bolivian capital city La Paz. 81-year-old Toribio Ticona grew up in poverty, raised in a single-parent house with a mother that couldn't read or write. He is said to share the pontiff's own thrifty lifestyle. Ticona and the new cardinals will be given their traditional red hats on June 29.
The
new Bolivian cardinal, Monsignor Toribio Ticona, is an 81-year-old Quechua native. He comes from very humble origins and used to sell newspapers to help his mom. He also worked as a shoeshine boy, mechanic, construction worker, and chief of the National Brewery Company in Potosí. When he was 30 years old, he started his priesthood journey and has worked mostly with mining centers. He was the mayor of the Chacarilla municipality for 13 years in the rural area of La Paz department. He used to carry out his work as mayor after he held Mass. Pope Francis just announced him as the new Bolivian cardinal. This was greeted by President Evo Morales, who is also a Quechua native. Other Catholic bishops introduced him to media on Monday. He said that he will use his close friendship with President Morales to improve the relationship between the state and the Catholic Church. Since 2009, Bolivia constitutionally dropped Catholicism as its official religion, declaring itself a secular state.
That was Freddy Morales from La Paz. In Paraguay, activists have protested in front of the Israeli embassy in Asunción. Demonstrators organized a die-in protest against their country's decision to move its embassy to Jerusalem. Paraguay is the third country after the US and Guatemala to move its embassy to Jerusalem. However, this decision has to be approved by the new Paraguayan president-elect, Mario Abdo Benítez. Under international law, Jerusalem is a city in dispute to be divided between Israelis and Palestinians. We'll take one last short break, but join us after this video from our multimedia colleagues.
Ma'am, the reason I asked you for your ID is because I came in here and I saw that you guys are speaking Spanish, which is very unheard of up here.
Your staff should be speaking English, not Spanish.
Because of people like you, our nation is...
Welcome back. The Syrian army has declared that it has taken full control of all areas around the capital, Damascus, for the first time in 7 years. The announcement came after troops cleared opposition fighters from the Yarmouk Palestinian refugee camp and the Ajar al-Aswad district. The forces will continue to search houses and tunnels for hidden suicide attackers and snipers. Support from Russia and Iran has enabled President Bashar al-Assad's troops to retake control of the capital and other cities in western Syria. The Palestinian government has called the International Criminal Court to open an immediate investigation into Israeli crimes in the occupied Palestinian territories. Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Malki met with prosecutor Fatou Bensouda in The Hague. This is the first time the Palestinian government submits a referral to the International Criminal Court. Al-Malki said the referral addressed issues including settlement expansion, land grabs, illegal exploitation of natural resources, as well as the brutal and calculated targeting of unarmed protesters, particularly in the Gaza Strip. However, Israel never signed the court's statute.
Grave crimes within the jurisdiction of the court continue to be committed in the territory of the State of Palestine and against the Palestinian people. Those most responsible for the crimes highlighted in the referral must be held accountable for their actions without further delay.
South Korean President Moon Jae-in has arrived in the United States to meet President Donald Trump 3 weeks before planned talks between the U.S. and North Korea. They are likely to discuss a joint strategy for dealing with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Last week, Kim Jong-un threatened to pull out of a summit in Singapore scheduled for June 12. A campaign group fighting poverty in the U.S. are taking actions against low wages. Workers spent Monday morning protesting at the McDonald's headquarters in Chicago. Following that action, the group headed for the Illinois state capitol in busloads with a message to lawmakers that poverty is a form of violence and that McDonald's and the government have an obligation to raise wages for workers and close the racial salary gap. The actions, which began May 14, will last 40 days.
I'm Mary and I'm a McDonald's worker. Today I'm here at the state capitol building and I'm taking civil disobedience because I believe in what the 5 for 15 stands for. I believe that we deserve better wages. I believe that we should be treated like people and not like animals. And today they are going to hear us. So I'm here, I'm standing and I'm fighting.
7 UK citizens of Caribbean origin are claiming they were racially profiled at a KFC in Berlin. This video, which was filmed by one of the customers, shows German police asking the group to leave the fast food outlet. A member of the group told the Grenadian journalist Mikey Hutchinson they were having lunch in KFC when an employee asked them to be quiet. When one on the table questioned why they were being singled out in a restaurant full of people, another worker said to call the police. You can clearly hear German police being asked repeatedly to explain why they were being asked to leave the fast food place. The group, who was in Berlin for the Carnival of Cultures, say they believe the incident was racially motivated. In Paraguay, we have the story on Paraguay protesting in front of the embassy in Asunción. Let's go and see if we can connect to our correspondent in Caracas, Ian Bruce. We are getting reports from the official proclamation of results of President Nicolás Maduro on his re-election. Let's see if we can have Ian. Hello, Ian. Yes.
1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1.
Yes, we have Ian over there. He's waiting for our report from Caracas. Let's see if we can have him back. I'm afraid we don't have Ian at the moment, but we'll be coming back with him in another newscast. So this comes to the end of our news brief. But as you know, this and another story, you can find them on our website, telesurtv.net/English. And be sure to follow also on social media, Telesur on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Thank you for watching.